Hello and welcome to DDOCast episode 380, recorded live on Sunday, May 3rd. I'm your host, Patrick. With me this week, we have Voodu. Welcome back, sir.
Hello, everyone.
We also have BonnieBew.
Hello, happy Sunday.
Yay, Sunday. Well, it doesn't feel like Sunday for me. I've been working all week. This week's screenshot, Gonzi gets the attention of a Medusa in the 220th screenshot of the week. I like the helm in this shot, and I like how it kind of melds into the cattail and looks like it gives it a nice little, really long horn in the back. It's kind of fun. We like to talk.
Looks like Predator.
Yeah, it kind of does. A halfling predator. We like to talk about Dungeons and Dragons online nearly every weekend. You can catch us through Google Plus, Hangouts, Twitch, YouTube, the DDO forums, or from our website at DDOCast.com. DDOCast is hosted by CyberEars, the awesome podcast hosting network. Shows are usually available within a few days of recording. And the next show will probably be on Saturday, May 9th, and you can stay updated by following us on the social media pages, particularly Twitter or our website, DDOCast.com, with our calendar. On the podcast this week, we have some Update 25. Patch 2 was released, so we'll talk about that. Some details about Temple of Elemental Evil the devs mentioned. We'll talk about some of that. Some teasers for what's coming up. And we're going to start by discussing leading a guild. That's going to be our topic for the week. I think maybe just really quickly to start, let's go around the horn and say what are our experience with being in guild and leading a guild briefly. And maybe we'll start with Bonnie.
I'm the leader of a tribe called Zerg right now in Canada, and I have been in some shape or form since we started in 2010. And I've been a member of guilds. I certainly, when I was doing Shadowpalooza, I created my own guild on one server on Argo because I was doing a lot of playing there because of the Spring Fling group that just wrapped up. But everywhere else, I looked for somebody to join. So that was like a lot of experience in terms of being part of a guild and what was I looking for in terms of who did I want to play with.
Voodu?
Hey, I'm the co-leader / acting leader at times of the High Lords of Malkir on Sarlona, which is a guild I've been in for about 5 years, and the guild's been around for about 6 years. So we're a well-established guild on Sarlona, and DDO is my only MMO that I have ever played, and so, you know, I want everyone to know that when I'm speaking about guilds or leading a guild, that's the position, that's the perspective I'm coming from, and this is my second, really only my second serious guild in the game. The guild I was in prior to, well, a couple guilds ago wasn't a very serious guild, and I've been co-leader for about 3 years.
Hey, and so I've been in a couple of guilds. My only experience in MMOs is also DDO. I guess that's a fair point to bring up. I've been in a couple of guilds throughout the years. Usually I have only left when the population of the guild kind of petered out, which happened twice. The very first guild I was in many years, well, the first serious guild I was in many years ago kind of imploded. There was the leader left and nobody liked the successor, and it got ugly. And then I was in Fallen Heroes for a number of years, and then that kind of petered out due to some unfortunate circumstances. And then I was in Prophets of the New Republic. These are all on Kyber. And that one petered out as well, although there's still a few people in that. And now I'm in Lava Divers. And for the last 3 of those, I was never the leader of the guild, but I was an officer and typically one of the raid leaders, more so in Fallen Heroes and Lava Divers, and then occasionally in Prophets. But I was always kind of, particularly these days, I'm one of the guys that leads our guild raids. And we'll talk about being a leader without actually being the leader as well. But to start, what makes a good guild leader? Let's just kind of start there. Go.
I say number 2 things are patience and flexibility. I mean, the only time I've left a guild is because of the leader, I kind of felt that you were unable to like negotiate or really have a discussion about policies and kind of the sense of my way or the highway, or like you're trying to talk about some kind of conflict or issue and it was like running into a brick wall. So I'm the opposite of that. I usually want people to be able to talk about things. I want people to not fly off the handle and get upset whenever something doesn't go perfectly the first time. And I want to be able to be friends as well as the leader of the guild.
Voodu, do you have any thoughts?
I think it was our former president, George W. Bush, that said this would be a lot easier if this were a dictatorship, as long as I'm the dictator. But no, I'm kidding. That's the first time I've ever quoted George Bush, I think. So
I think I just lost about 10 viewers.
yeah, no, I'm not giving him any kind of credit. That's a ridiculous quote.
There's a little bit of truth to it, though. There is.
Well,
I mean,
it
it would
makes
be easy if you were just a dictator.
The easiest
right?
guild to run is the one where you're the only member.
Right, exactly.
I think one thing to always remember as a guild leader is to keep in mind that this is just a game, that people are here to spend their free time in and to have fun and just to sort of get away from all the garbage in real life. And so don't create an environment where things seem really dogmatic or like a job. When this game, if this game starts feeling like a job, it's over. Forget it. Like, we're just here to relax and have fun. That doesn't mean you can't have rules and code of conduct, but remember, we're all here to have fun and have a good time.
And I think it's like the recognition that not everyone's the same. So different people, if they're looking to lead a guild or they're looking to be part of a guild, are going to be looking for different things. Some people love structure and fixed schedules and having like a guild calendar of when they raid, when they do activities, and they want the organization. And some people want rules to like kind of shape how the code of behavior for members of the guild and what they expect of each other, or if they're permadeath or role-playing guild, what is expected of members. But then others are like me and completely chaotic, and so I choose chaos as a lifestyle, and I choose chaos in my guild. So not everybody is looking for the same thing that's going to ring that bell and make a person a good guild leader.
I can just imagine Bonnie's guild's conversation. So, what do you want to do today? I don't know. What do you want to do?
It is totally that. It is totally that. It's like whoever has a feeling about what they want to do, that's what we do. Whoever actually needs something, and we very rarely schedule anything. It's just a matter of the personalities that are in the guild.
It's the vultures from Jungle Book.
Yes.
Right, those guys. I think when I think about what makes a good guild leader is, one is communication. You have to be communicating and be available to talk with your guild, and that lets you put a finger on the pulse of your guild. It lets you kind of really get there. And kind of along with that is, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, is kind of getting the people in the guild to own the vision for the guild and be a part of that. I think is really important. But I think kind of a fundamental thing that I think of as a leader of the guild, and I think leading a guild in general, is as a guild leader, your role is to make everyone else's in the guild's enjoyment of the game more fun, more enjoyable, make that experience better, right? Like, that's kind of the overarching idea. There's a lot of ways to do that, and we'll kind of talk about that. But I'll kind of move into what makes a good guild.
Oh, that's so hard. But I think that the number one thing that, I think trust and friendship among guild members is really important. But then I tend to lean towards smaller guild is more my style. But to me, what separates a guild from just pugging on the streets is, it's not just having a group of people you can regularly party with. It's about, like you said before, about guild leadership, and it's a recurring theme throughout everything that affects guilds. You want to add to your enjoyment of DDO. So, a good guild for any individual is one that adds to their enjoyment, to their game playing experience, and that makes it better for them, and that fits in with the way that they see themselves within the game. And if you're not doing that with your guild, you're just getting airship buffs, and you can do that in a solo guild.
What you said earlier about what you said, Patrick, about the vision of the guild. As a leader, you should have a vision of what you want your guild to be, and you should always be working toward that. And that doesn't mean that it's an arduous task, but you should have that in mind. And I think that the guild leader should be an exemplary example of what that vision is. Whatever, if the code of conduct is part of that vision, or if having highly skilled toons is part of that vision, or whatever the case may be, the guild leader should represent the best of that guild's values.
It's a good word too there. I think a good guild to me is one where people are involved and they buy into the guild, right? Like they're not just there because they want the ship buffs or to take advantage of the raids that the group does or reincarnating or anything like that. They're not taking advantage of it. Everyone's there is, and this is going to be a little bit of kind of religious speak in a way, but I think there's a lot of application and parallels here. Like everyone's buying into the mission. Everyone's on mission, and or at least most of the people are on mission. They're supporting each other, going out of their way to help each other achieve certain goals that they have in game, and it kind of all works in this really nice symbiotic relationship. Whereas you look at guilds that kind of start to fall apart, you get people that are on different paths, they're trying to do different things that are, especially when those are conflicting, you kind of get into issues. And everyone kind of has a very different vision of what they want from the guild. And you end up with a loose plugging alliance is really what it is. It's not like a full guild.
One of the terms... Oh, go ahead, Patrick.
No, go ahead. I was going to transition.
One of the terms that I emphasize in High Lords is I feel like we have a community. I think that's a really good word to use to describe what we have, and that community, that culture that we have, that family feel that we have, is supremely important to me and the guildies in High Lords, and it's important when you're taking on new people to make sure that they're part of that community. It's kind of like you said, so you don't just have a bunch of soloers in the guild, or it's not just people there to use the ship buffs. And we have 130 something accounts in High Lords, which makes us a little bit bigger of a guild. Now only about 70 something of them are active. But it's
still a big guild.
That's a pretty big guild, but it's not so big that you can't get to know everybody. Like we've got about 40 people that are playing every day. When you log into Prime Time in our guild, we have maybe a couple dozen people that are on. But once you're in the guild for a few months, you can get to know everybody. And like I said, it's got a family feel to it, which is really awesome.
That's a great achievement for that number of people too. I think the most people that have ever really been active in any of the guilds that I've been in is maybe up to 20. So having 40 people on every night, and there's advantages and disadvantages to that. Right? You have to kind of juggle hey, we're going to run a raid, and you don't have enough slots for everyone in the guild. But on the flip side, you can have more things going on, so it gives choices for people that are in the guild, right? So I don't want to run a raid tonight. Hey, the other guys are... there's a second group doing something that I want to do, or a third group, or a fourth group, which can be really helpful. So we're going to kind of transition into a little bit more of kind of building the guild and the vibe of the guild. And I think the first thing you kind of have to figure out is, what's your guild about? Like, what is as a guild is going to kind of be your focus? What brought you together? Why are people wanting to join the guild? I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that specifically.
I'll go first because Bonnie, I want to give her a chance to
To think
relax and not
and
feel
drink more
stressed.
coffee.
Yeah. Um, High Lords is like a bunch of 30-somethings and 40-somethings. We do have some 20-somethings, and we even have some 50-somethings, but we're mostly 30s and 40-somethings. So it's a pretty mature adult guild. We don't allow anybody under the age of 18. And one of we actually have 10 rules in the guild, and they're all written down. But when we started out, they weren't. In fact, there was just sort of like two what we sometimes call our prime directives now, and they have been really helpful in shaping this guild over the years. And they are, one is no drama. Like I mentioned earlier, people come here to relax, have a good time. They don't want to deal with drama in the game. They're dealing with that in their real life, their jobs and relationships and things. So I like to keep a nice drama-free environment in High Lords. And then the second thing, our other prime directive, if you will, is to be respectful to others, and that doesn't just apply to other guildies. It also means don't going into pugs and other people's raids and acting the fool and being a douchebag or acting like an elitist or something.
I think something you kind of want to think about is like, again, what brings your guild together? And I think some of the things that just kind of pop to my mind is this going to be a guild that's about endgame and raiding, or is that going to be a focus, or are you going to be more focusing on reincarnating and building lots of vaults and stuff like that? That can be something you think about. Is it a bunch of friends that are coming together? That might be a little bit more loose in what you're actually going to be doing in game, but more about the relationships that you have. I think you have to consider how big do you want your guild to be. Because you have to consider guild size, renown. Is leveling your guild an important thing for you guys? Do you want to get to that level 200 and be one of those higher level guilds? Or are you just kind of in it, you just want some of the buffs and you don't really care otherwise? There's lots of those kind of questions. And I think the thing that really makes that it's really important for as a guild leader is when you're thinking about that is you might have a vision for that, but get other people involved with it too. Like again, you don't want necessarily to be a dictator about this. Maybe everyone isn't aligned with what you want to do too, but I think it's what your guild is about has to be, from a leader's perspective, a constant conversation. It's not just this is what I want it to be, and this is what it's always going to be, because the game changes too. So that's something you have to consider as well. Mm-hmm. Bonnie, do you have any thoughts you'd like to share on this one?
I think the fundamental motivation, I think, with my guild has always been, in a sense, friendship. But in terms of forming a guild, yeah, you have to make those choices in terms of, do we allow people who are younger than age 18? Are we looking for, older people? Are we looking for experienced players versus are we open to like guiding people who are new to the game? Are we here to try to help people get comfortable with the game and learn about it when they're first starting out? Or do we only want people who are experienced because we're really focused on self-sufficient people and we're looking for people we can hang out with and things like that? So they're important considerations. And I think there's also this idea of, is your guild introverted or is it extroverted? I'd say that my guild is more of an introverted. We just, sometimes we pug around the server and stuff, but we're usually playing amongst ourselves.
And on the streets too, right?
And on the streets. On the streets, in traffic. But the High Lords is definitely like an extroverted guild because you really have more of a presence as doing things on Sorlona as a server and reaching out to people and inviting players from the server in with your guild to like run raids on like the training nights for different raids and things. So there's some different attitudes there in terms of what your guild is about. And so here again, I think it's kind of personal preference what your guild is about, what's most important to you, what are your values as a person who's a member of a guild or a leader of the guild.
I think it's important too to note that like you can have a lot of like things that your guild's about, right? Like High Lords
Yes.
don't do teaching raids every single night, right? It's a once a week thing. I'm sure you guys raid on other nights too, though, right? Like it's not just those teaching raids.
We raid every night, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's probably fair to say High Lords is more of a raiding guild. But, it's not really the only thing that they have to do. Like, my guilds have typically had anywhere between 2 and 4 raid nights a week. But then the other nights we're doing other stuff, too, right? Like, it's not the only thing that we're doing is raiding. So those are things you can kind of keep in mind. Let's talk about guild rules. Because a lot of guilds have rules. A lot of guilds have one rule, which is keep the drama out of here. We don't want drama, because people don't really want a lot of conflict in the game. I don't know. There's some people that seem to. There's certain personalities on every server that seem to attract and like creating drama. But I think in general, most people want to stay away from that stuff. My current guild, we have some rules in place that are kind of intentionally vague in terms of participation. Like, we expect you to be regularly participating in things. We don't expect you to be there all the time, and we understand that real life has to take precedence and should take precedence over playing DDO. But we're not looking for people to join the guild and just log on once every month. We kind of expect people that are in the guild to be active and regularly participating in things, particularly like raid nights that we do. There's kind of a loose expectation of there being participation, but my guild leader and I kind of had a lot of back and forth on this in particular of we don't need a hard number on this, but get the concept across that you should be participating. I don't know. What are your guys' take on guild rules? What are some of the guild rules you guys have besides no drama?
I have no written rules. We even have we don't like drama, but people have emotions and feels. So I'm more of a thing that eventually somebody might be dramatic about something, but everybody has to be cool with recognizing that everybody has a bad day here or there, and part of our recruiting thing is to kind of figure out who is drama for drama's sake and who is just like a person. So
you guys are kind of more friendship based, like you said. So
we are more friendship based. So we're looking for people who kind of have similar temperaments and that are probably not going to have a lot of conflict. We're trying to identify that stuff before we even let somebody in the guild to make sure that the new person is going to be comfortable and that the existing people are going to be comfortable and there will hopefully not be conflict.
Friends have conflict occasionally, but hopefully they're friends.
Yeah, exactly. Because they're friends, you just get over it and move on and continue being friends. I think one of the main rules is that nobody invites anybody to the guild, just because they want to. We talk about all of it. We're kind of democratic in that sense, that everybody kind of has a say-so to give feedback before we invite somebody. And so you can't just openly invite somebody to the guild. And then I guess the only underlying rule is kind of be open to communication, to talk about. If there's a problem, talk about it. And kind of a sense that a fight club that, you don't talk about Fight Club. You talk about guild stuff that's private about guild members with guild members, but not outside the guild, because you're protecting people's privacy. You're like respecting their privacy, and you're respecting them as people. So there's a little bit of that going on too, and I think that's all the rules. But we don't actually have like a website where we say these are the rules. This is our charter. Here, understand this is exactly what we expect of you. But because here again, chaos everywhere, panic in the streets.
What server are you on?
I love it.
Kenneth.
Careful on the streets of Canada.
Watch out for those street pugs.
Because we're probably surfing down the street and we may run over you.
And if you're lucky, they're wearing clothes.
If you're lucky.
Yeah, I can echo most of what Bonnie said, and I know we're going to be talking about recruitment in a bit, so I'm going to save that. Yeah, I mentioned how important community is in High Lords. That's a major theme of us, is having that community, and part of that, one of our guild rules is actually to have all active alts in guild. We don't allow our guildies to be in other guilds. And the reason for that is because, well, it really started back when the renown decay was an issue. We didn't want people showing up for an hour here and then, they're spending the rest of their time in another guild, earning renown elsewhere. But there's another big component of that, and it's that if you have people that are moonlighting in your guild and in a bunch of other guilds and spreading their time thinly, it breaks up the community that you have. So if that community, if that family feels important to you, I think that this rule has served us well. It's been a point of contention to a handful of people over the years, but overall it has worked really well for us. People understand, and for example, in High Lords, like, we want people that want to be in High Lords. If you don't want to be in High Lords, then don't be in High Lords. But if you want to be in High Lords, then be all in.
It's an interesting rule. I'm sure there's lots of guilds that do that, but I haven't really heard of or run into a guild where that was a main thing. Although I would say most of my guilds, there's kind of with prophets and lava divers, there's a lot of commingling between the two guilds, but it was a lot of times it was secondary accounts. So there's kind of always that thing going on, but yeah, there's a lot of value in that, and surely there's going to be some conflict with that because some people maybe don't necessarily want to do that, and maybe High Lords isn't the guild for them. It's not that you can't run with them either.
One of the differences between the way that High Lords is run, the way that Bonnie was talking about her guild, is that we actually do have these guild rules written out, and before anybody gets through the doors, I go over it with them. And it doesn't matter if it's somebody I've known in the game for 2 years and they've been running with us, and that it feels like you already know everything about the guild. Like, I make sure to go over letter by letter every single rule to make sure that everybody understands what's expected of them. And these aren't, like hardcore, hard to follow rules. They're actually really easy to follow. But this way, there's no surprises once people get through the doors. And we actually have, our most detailed guild rules actually regarding guild raids and loot etiquette. So it's things like, well, with us, being involved in guild raids is totally optional. And I actually had a conversation with a newer guildie recently, and they thought they were supposed to come because I guess the guilds they were in before required them to be there. And you were talking about that a little bit, Patrick. But for us, it's optional. We have a larger guild, though, so we're filling our raids. It's not usually an issue for us to fill the raids. But when it comes to like loot, for example, I think it's really good and helpful to make it clear. Like, for example, in High Lords, if you're in a raid and you pull a named item and you don't want it for yourself, you have to roll it off. There's no passing among guildies without a roll. There's no giving it to your friend. Even the non-guildies in our raids are allowed to roll on the stuff. And I think that's an important one too. And the reason why is because and most of the time, the people that aren't guildies are our friends. These are people that we know, we've been running with. They're part of our community, even if they're not part of our guild. And so that High Lords community that I talked about extends beyond our actual guildies. If we're just passing things among our guildies, and the people that are raiding with us see that, that's just going to piss them off, and they're not going to want to run with us. So we'd be shooting ourselves in the foot if we just passed among ourselves. We're going to be seen as a selfish guild, but also these people helped us complete that raid, and it's our view that they have every right to roll on that as well. And even some sort of like things that are going to seem real obvious to most people, but if you've been playing this game or other games for a while, you're going to see things like this. We've actually detailed, because there were just too many problems over the years, things like, don't ever roll on loot just for fun. Don't ever roll if you've recalled out of the raid. Because how many times have you been in a raid where somebody was like, oh, I just rolled for fun. They didn't pay attention to their roll. They actually won it, but they recalled out. It was passed to them, and now bad feelings arise. And it's really important to try to avoid situations where bad feelings are going to arise. So that's something we actually put in writing, because it was like every 6 months we were dealing with something stupid like this. You were like,
Yeah.
okay, we got to solidify this.
That's a good place to
And
have those rules too.
That's where actual rules come from, or policies, or kind of frame of minds, is when something actually happens and it makes things uncomfortable for people. And then suddenly you're like, oh, okay, we need to have to actually address this. And put a foot down. This is actually how we act in this situation, or what we expect of people. And so that's a good thing to bring up, is that it's situational and experience based.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the raid loot, because I've been on the fence with it. The one of the guilds I was in was very much like you kind of pass the stuff between the guild first. If you weren't in the guild, you only got to roll on something if nobody in that guild wanted it.
Yeah, that's what we do.
And I kind of, from the outside, I kind of felt like, but I want a chance on it. I mean, it was something that I knew. I quickly learned with those people. I ended up joining the Prophets. This was that guild for the most part. And I'm not trying. These are great folks, and I'm not trying to knock them at all. This is just how things work. And from the outside, when I started kind of getting involved with them and raiding, it was like I kind of saw a lot of pieces go by that I never got a chance to roll on, and I was a little bit bummed. But at the same time, I recognized that I knew that going in after like the third or fourth raid, right? Like I knew that was how they ran and stuff. So I knew that in running one of those raids with them, that I wasn't necessarily going to have as good of an opportunity to do that. But as I kind of was running with them, then I kind of got in. Like before I got into the guild, there was a channel, and then kind of I had opportunities to roll on stuff a little bit for some of the other folks as well. And I kind of went back and forth on whether or not I liked that or not. And I think there's certainly validity absolutely to what Voodu is saying, like the idea that they helped you complete the raid, they should have an opportunity of rolling on the loot. That hasn't always been my experience with pugs in a raid. I'm not going to knock anyone.
I wasn't going to say that. I wasn't going to go there, but okay.
Sometimes they're not as helpful completing the raid. And I think there's some validity to the idea that, and this is from a guild that we were running, even after we were all done with the raid, we were still running the raid because people liked running raids. It wasn't even so much about the loot as so much the experience of running raids. That was something that was kind of a core value of the guild. So there was kind of this aspect of we made ourselves stronger so that we were able to, and that actually helped us complete those raids repetitively and kind of like over time, after like a month or two of the raid being out, a lot of that loot actually was filtering to the folks that weren't in our guild or in our inner social circle outside of the guild. So that you can kind of go both ways, but I think having a clarity there is really good, right?
Yeah, knowing what's expected. But yeah, I kind of feel that way, that my guild raids a decent amount, a lot, and so we may like reserve prime loot for guild members initially. If somebody needs something, we want to take care of them if they're part of the guild. But we run raids enough that doesn't take very long before people have what they need. So there's more stuff getting put up and just passed to people who say that they need it, who aren't part of the guild. So I don't feel much guilt in not necessarily taking care of people, because I think we do enough raids and people may group with us over time that eventually they're going to benefit from running raids with us in a big way, probably.
And I think the kind of the big thing to keep in mind with guild rules is a lot of times they're serving two purposes. One is to foster a good community, a healthy community that everyone wants to be a part of in the guild. The other thing is what do you want the server to know you guys as, right? You want people to like your guild. People oftentimes forget that when they're in a guild, particularly when you're pugging, and very particularly when you're in a raid, what the guild leading the raid, or the group of folks kind of running the raid, when they bring you in, they don't necessarily see your name, particularly early on. Like unless you run with a group 3 or 4 times, can in a short amount of time and with some consistency. Like as a guild leader, as a raid leader, I can say it for sure. I don't know two names very well. There's a very small number of names for characters that join our raids that I recognize that aren't affiliated with our guild or one of our chat channels. What I see when someone joins is I look at what their class builds and stuff are and what guild they're in. And you want some of those. A lot of guilds will have guild rules that will give an idea of, and this is actually one of the things that we have in our guild rules is you are representing our guild. We expect you to represent our guild in a way that is positive and what we expect that to look like, right? Now we're fine with being Zergers. Like that's if you go on a quest and people get upset at you because you Zerged through a little bit and they weren't expecting that, but they weren't clear that wasn't what they wanted. No one in our guild's really going to care because, that's.
If asked, I'm always of the opinion that if you're not the one leading the party, if your guild's not the one leading the party, you need to try to take cues from whoever is hosting the party and be a good guest. And
Absolutely.
I know that people in my guild do not always do that. And when I hear about it and I don't like it, I usually express my displeasure. But,
word to the wise, if you're a guild leader, you will hear from other guild leaders.
Yes.
There's actually
that is true.
Thing. There's a community of guild leaders. Like the guild leaders end up knowing who the guild leaders are in an amazing amount of alacrity. Like they talk to each other too.
I don't think.
No, I'm still waiting for that to happen because I don't know any other guild leaders.
Whenever anybody approaches me to talk about my guild, my usual response is, "I'm not their mother. I don't want to be." It's like.
I had a guild leader.
I'm okay with whatever they did because they're in my guild, and I'm not gonna have someone outside the guild really kind of try to get me involved in some kind of conflict.
My guild leader in Fallen Heroes she knew every guild, even guilds I'd never heard of, and she knew who the guild leaders were. It was just kind of her personality. But there was an instance that really comes to mind where someone was in another guild's raid who we happen to have a really good relationship with. I even knew who that guild leader was, but they were in a raid, they got some loot, and they auctioned it off. And within 20 minutes...
Ooh, wow, that is
20 minutes,
no.
we heard about it.
Mm-hmm.
And, he was a newer player, and... It ended up being a really positive experience because it was a teaching moment and we were able to handle it really well. Between her and myself, she kind of brought me in to help kind of figure out how to deal with it. But the other guild leader was ticked and the guild wasn't happy and they said, "Hey, this is what you guy did." I was, "Oh, okay, we'll talk about it, right?" And it's part of being in a guild is you have to remember what you are speaking and representing other people. Which is why there's guild rules and why that they exist for most people. So you kind of want to be aware of that. Again, we keep it kind of vague.
At the same time, it reminds me that I learned a long time ago that if you have a guild that is remotely high profile and you want to be a well-liked guild, you may be disappointed. I think it's really hard for to have a lot of people like you all the time. Because of differences between people and their personalities. I accepted a long time ago that a tribe called Zerg was not going to be the most beloved of guilds. That just it's even when we were trying to be nice with people, there would be instances where someone just hated us and we had no idea why. Didn't even know players, didn't have that recognition of who they were or whatever, but they had formed some kind of opinion. And I mean, it's a double-edged sword. I mean, part of it is your players are representing you, but also sometimes they're just being themselves, and sometimes people just aren't going to like the way you are.
Kind of a funny story, and then we'll move on to the next kind of topic here. Is I was using the forums to make a trade, and we'd worked out a trade, and it was a great trade for both parties involved. I don't even remember what it was, but I was really happy with it. He was really happy with it, and he sends me a message back like, "Oh, we're not going to trade. Two of your characters are on my squelch list." And if you know me, like, I'm not a person who really ends up on people's squelch list. Like, this was surprising to me. I told some of my guild members this, and they were completely flabbergasted that not one but two of my characters was on somebody's, like, the same person's squelch list. This was just like mind blowing. And the best we could figure was I was fairly active in. I wasn't like the primary leader, but I was kind of like the backseat driver for a lot of our raids, like helping our leader lead, and sometimes we'd kind of get in a little conflict with how we thought it should be run. But he was very much a, this is how we're going to run the raid. Get in line or get out, right? And there were some good reasons for that, and there were some arrogant reasons for that. But there were some areas where we weren't going to have a discussion on this. We're running Shroud was kind of a big one. We were running speed shrouds at the time, and we ran things a little differently than everyone else did. And we'd say, this is what we want you to do, and then people were like, no, you can't do that. Like this is what we're doing. This is how we've done it. We've done this, like, we do this 5 times a week. Like, I think we understand what we're doing. We know what we're doing. Everyone you're the new guy. Just get in line. And they try and have an argument about it. And, so the best we could figure was I got guilt by association in one of those cases. But it does go to show you, like, there is, you do represent other people. That's something to keep in mind. And as a guild leader, you're trying to make sure that one thing you have to keep in mind is, how are you and everyone that's in your guild being represented to the server?
There's one more dimension I'd like to add to our discussion about loot and guild policy about loot. And because there is some disagreement about how that should be handled, and that's fine. Is you have your guild rules, people know what to expect. There's another dimension to having, like I said, like, if you don't want it for yourself, we also allow people to trade in chests. You pulled a raid item, you don't want it, and somebody else pulled a raid item you do want. You guys can swap in chests. That's fine. But one of the values to, if you don't want it, roll it off, and roll it off to everybody, is it takes the pressure off the person who pulled it to be passing it to certain people. Like, you might feel pressured to pass it to a friend. You might feel pressured to pass it to the guild leader or an officer, or maybe there are 2 of your good friends in there and they both want it, and you're like, this is going to cause hard feelings if I choose this dude over the other dude or whatever. This way, everybody's got to just roll it off. The pressure is off of you. So there's some value from that perspective as well.
It's also, I would say, the rolling things off, whether or not you first let a small group within the raid roll or everyone roll, is rolling it off is really kind of the only widely accepted etiquette for raid loot that you're not going to use that I've ever seen. There's not really a lot of other. Occasionally, I've seen auctions, and I have bid on 2 or 3 items, and kind of felt a little crappy about it afterwards, actually, and decided after a few times I'm just not going to do it.
If I ever saw somebody doing that, I would never run with that person again. In my defense, one of them was like, somebody said, "What do you give?" Okay, this is up. Who's gonna be? And I replied in kind of a joking manner, like, I lowballed. I really lowballed. And he took it, and he gave it to me. I was like, all right, well, I said I'd give him that, so I gave it to him. It was like 2 red scales for at the time, a really rare +4 tome. I think before you had 5s or something like that, I think. And he was like, I've got a 4 tome. What are you giving for it? And I said, I'll give you 2 red scales for it, not thinking at all that was going to win. And it did. So I honored what I had said, but it was intended to not actually be serious. Anyways, let's talk about recruiting, because this is a big part of being a guild leader. Big time.
Yes.
And I think, from my perspective, the thing that you want to... The big thing for me, because I've been in two guilds where this didn't happen, and I'm not trying to blame anyone, and people kind of left really quickly, but I think for the thing to keep in mind for recruiting is if you want your guild to keep going, you have to recruit faster than you lose people. Um, so that's just something to keep in mind. It's not always possible, and this is a subset of people's life. Real life comes in, and I mean, we lost like 6 people out of a grade or a guild of 12 people, some of which didn't play as often. We lost 6 people in like 3 months in a really close, not very recruiting guild, and it killed the guild. And that was no one's fault. It just kind of happened suddenly. But so let's talk about how do you guys go about recruiting new people?
There's a hugely important piece of advice here. If you're leading a guild and you want it to continue, I want to emphasize what Patrick said. Don't ever stop taking on people. I've seen so many guilds on Sarlona just fade away and die off over the years because they stopped taking people. They were their close group of 6 or 8 or 10 or people or whatever, and they didn't take on new people, and as those people trickled away, the guild just faded away into nothingness. In High Lords,
I'm going to jump in
go
real
ahead.
quick and say, if that does happen to you, don't feel like it's not something that is bad, right? It happens.
That's natural, yeah.
It's unfortunate,
Life happens.
I wish that the last 2 guilds I was in didn't peter out, but as someone who's a friend of a lot of the people in those guilds, and they left for real life reasons, and like one guy had a kid, or I think more than one had a kid actually, and I want to be really supportive of that, that happening in those people's lives, and it's not a big deal. But I think it's really important to say that if you want to lead a guild, a lot of times, at least sometimes, a guild disbanding is not your fault. It just happens. Now you can keep going.
Well, we are very deliberate about the rate at which we take on new people into High Lords, and that may be about 1 to 2 people per month. We always make sure that we're always taking on new people, and that keeps us going. We're in about our 6th year, and High Lords is thriving where other guilds have just faded off. And the faces have changed over the years, but we continue to have that really positive community. So continue to take on people, do it at a deliberate rate. You don't want to take a bunch of new people on at once because that can be alienating to your legacy members. They could be like, who are they? Log in and they're like, who are all these new people? You don't want to have that feeling of logging in and not knowing the people in your guild. So if you're taking on people just 1 or 2 at a time, they get a chance to sort of assimilate to the culture and get to know people, and that has been really valuable for us. And also as an abstract way of looking at how we take on people, one does not become a High Lord and then become a part of our community. One becomes a part of our community and then gets to join the guild. And so that we have very strict front-end recruiting policy. It can take people weeks or months to get in.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's been frustrating for people, but it has served us really well, and it makes sure that they're going to be a good fit for our community so that we don't have to deal with BS and drama once they get through the doors.
Yeah, and strangely enough, my guild is the same way. We treat it the same way. We've never been larger than medium size. Usually some are hovering around 25 to 30 active accounts, I think.
That's a pretty good size.
But it's always looking for people. The number one way to get into the guild is to play with us and get to know us. Come to our Mumble channel if you've played with us a lot and start to hang out and see if you like, talking with people regularly, joking with us, and if everybody gets along, because that's the number one way that we're going to invite someone into the guild, is if we've had contact with them. We just don't, random people sending tells, can I join the guild, aren't going to be happy because it usually does take weeks or months for somebody to get in that we don't know. But there's some people that we've known so long, that we've played with so much that, if they asked to join the guild, I would have no qualms about, yes, you can be here, because they already hang out in our Mumble chat. They're always there, like on a near daily basis, just being being our friend, even if they're in another guild. And I didn't bring that up earlier, but I think sometimes there are certain guilds that your guild might be really close to. They're like a sister city or something, that you're like simpatico or have at least similar kind of personalities or like each other. And so we have some of that. Like my guild, I think the high rollers on Cannith are probably like my guild's best friends in terms of other guilds. So we're usually like really like love all those people who are in high rollers. So there's some of that too. But it takes a long period of time because we want to make sure that not only we get along with the new member, but they get along with us, because we don't want the new person to be uncomfortable around anybody who's a member of the guild. You know, we want them to have as positive an experience being a part of the guild as we have.
I gotta say, and I've been on each of the main 3 guilds I've been in has had a very different kind of approach to recruiting. Profits was very closed. Like, it took me a while to get in, partly because I wasn't actively looking to switch guilds for most of the time, until I really actually asked if I could join. But I had been running with them for probably 4 to 6 months, like at least 3 of their 4 raid nights a week. Like, I was running with their raids a lot, so they got to know me. But it was actually kind of liberating from a sense. People would ask me if they could join that guild, and I was like, no. Like, that was the answer. It wasn't anything about them, but I didn't have to deal with any of that. It's like, no, we're really close, we're really tight knit. It was still somewhat of an organic process, but it was a very closed guild. My first guild was kind of more open to having people join, but we didn't really advertise that we're looking for people. We didn't really, like, if you asked to join, we'd have you run with us a few times or kind of like ask around and see what people thought about it. But generally, you kind of had to have at least a little bit of a relationship with at least a couple of people, so that we'd kind of know what you were about. The guild I'm in now is kind of much more like, we have an open advertisement on the forums. There's we're a lot more open about who we let into the guild, but there's still kind of a process, which and we just actually had someone just join our guild, and they applied from the forums, and then our guild leader posted in our Facebook group, and people kind of discussed it. And it was kind of, but really the discussion there was more about, do we really think that they are going to enjoy being in our guild, because they were kind of running a lot at lower levels, from what they wrote, and we don't tend to spend a lot of time at lower levels, so it was kind of a question of, it was less about, do we want him, and it was more about, do we feel that he's going to enjoy being in the guild, or is it going to be something he's going to not like because he's not going to be participating, because he's not really in the same place as we are at the moment. So that's kind of where I've been a lot of times. Do you guys openly advertise at all?
No.
Not really. I think we have a post on the forums, but usually it's just making fun of each other. You know, it's not like we actually want people to, like, you know, pound the door, or like a crowd. We don't want a crowd of people coming in, but I mean, we're out there, and people usually know we exist and stuff like that. And I mean, it's like you advertise yourself every time you let somebody into your party and you play the game. But no, we don't actively recruit, really.
We also. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go first.
Well, we never, like I said, we never openly recruit. We do occasionally take on people that we see as a good fit, and those are people that are running with us. So if I ever get cold called, which does happen pretty regularly, it's just we're not recruiting.
Yeah.
But I give them a little bit more than that too, you know, because we are running community events. We've got our Saturday teaching raids, we've got our Tuesday night Abbott Fest, we got our Friday night Mark of Death Fest. I'm also in the help channel, so there are lots of ways to get to know me and to get to know High Lords. And so I make sure to sort of put that out there. In addition to, I usually point them to the, you know, there's the guild forum within every server's forums. So I try to point them to that too, because if they're just brand new and they're just looking for a guild, and that's a good place to find a guild too. Because sometimes when people are new, they're just looking at the list and they're like, oh, I see 10 people on from that guild, so I'm going to try to join them.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to spend a little time kind of talking about two things that we didn't talk about recruitment. One is a lot of guilds use chat channels. So you can create user chats. We have one, well, we actually have kind of two. One is kind of more ours, and one's kind of more open one. But a lot of times what a guild will do is they'll have you run with you. They'll have you run with them, and maybe if they like you initially, but they're not sure if they want you to be in their guild, they'll invite you to a channel. Like a recruiting channel. That happens for some folks. I also want to talk about there are guilds that are very open, and if you want to join, you get to join, and that's pretty much the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's certainly a valid approach. I don't want to knock that approach. There's some dangers involved. You're probably more prone to having some drama with some people, but a guild like that's probably going to be much more. You'll have a lot more turnover. We're talking about kind of the generations of guilds as you recruit as people kind of come and go. So that's just kind of something to be aware of. But there are guilds that do that. There was a guild on Kyber. I think Helper's Guild was like that on Kyber for a number of years. I don't know if they still are, but they pretty much would take anybody, and they had some older players that would help kind of teach people the ropes, and it was a good guild for that. And I remember actually some people asked me if they could join my guild. I said, no, we don't recruit, but if you're new and you're looking for a guild, you might look at these guys because they'll take anybody and they help develop those players. And you even as a raid leader, you kind of knew that okay, if you're taking someone that's level 20 from that guild, they might be newer, but they're probably going to be for like the people, even if they're new, they will have had some good mentors. So some things you can keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
One more note about recruitment is that the final piece of that for our guild is that someone has to be voted in by 3 officers. And so it's not me acting unilaterally or anybody within the guild. Like, we talk about it, we vote, and we have about 10 officers and high lords, and so somebody could get in the guild without me ever even having a say in it. And I trust all of our officers totally. If they vote somebody in, and it's happened before, I'm cool with that.
You'll notice that we're talking about their recruiting from the standpoint of leading a guild, and none of us said the leader recruits. Like it's a team thing, and the leader's kind of
only
leading
time I think it's cool if I just unilaterally recruit someone is if I am re-inviting somebody who has previously been a member of the guild and
Yep.
left in good
That's a good
standing,
point.
like just because they stopped playing DDO, because I know that person and I know their history. And then I'm like, that's okay, because nobody's going to have a problem with that, because we know. But yeah, I'm not going to just go out and invite somebody to the guild because I want to. We have a similar process to what Voodu talked about, and everybody has a chance to give feedback in some way, shape, or form. And if someone wants to veto someone joining and they give a valid reason for it, we don't invite them. Even if people like them, we might continue to group with them, and we might continue to invite them to join our chat server and hang out with us. We just don't necessarily send them that invite to join the guild because of being respectful of someone who's in the group who wasn't on board with it.
Yep. I want to talk a little about officers, because again, we just kind of mentioned that leading a guild, unless the guild's really small, is not really a one-person job. And this will kind of talk a little bit about what we talked about earlier. I consider, and my guild leader considers me a leader in the guild. I'm just not the one wearing the crown. She definitely kind of fosters a lot of, promotes a lot of the discussion, and kind of is definitely the leader of the guild and takes that seriously. But you need help. So let's talk about officers. How do you go about promoting officers? What do you look for in officers? I've been in guilds that everyone was an officer.
That's my guild.
But let's talk
Everybody's
about
an
that a little bit.
We go through a process where I think we vet everybody beforehand. I think membership status is for people who maybe you don't want to give them the full keys to the castle, that maybe they're still maybe on probation or something like that. And we're small enough that by the time somebody gets into the guild, they've pretty much passed that, probation period, and I make everybody an officer. The only thing that there's really deep thought about in terms of positions in the guild is who gets the successor crown. And in case, like, I was in a car accident or something like that, we want to make sure that whoever has the rights to succession is somebody who we have faith in, who's going to be the next leader of the guild and be able to just, still be playing and everybody respects and things like that. But other than that, I just let everybody be an officer.
Voodu?
Like I said, we have about 10 officers, and that's with 130-something accounts. About 70 of those, 70-ish of those being active. Before I said, one does not become a High Lord and then become a member of our community. One becomes a member of our community and then becomes a High Lord. One of the things that the other leader in the guild emphasizes, and this is also an important sentiment to me, is that the leaders present themselves. Leaders lead. One does not become an officer and then leads. One leads and then becomes an officer. So those people that have those leadership skills are going to become evident. They're the ones taking the initiative to help people out. They're the ones taking the initiative to lead quests and groups, to lead raids. And so when those people stand out of the pack, those are the people that we like to make officers out of.
Yeah, I think that's what we're doing in my current guild is for a while everyone was an officer, or there were a lot of officers, and we made the decision. The guild leader was kind of wondering if they wanted to keep that, and she led a discussion on whether or not what we kind of felt about that, and we ultimately, as a group, decided that we were going to cut down on the officers, and she literally, other than like a very small handful of characters, took everyone off of being officer and put everyone as a member, and then and this was kind of understood going into it. Then really quickly we chose who the officers were, and we had to make it clear that being an officer is not necessarily a reflection of how good you are in the guild. Being an officer was a reflection that you are actively participating in leadership in the guild. So just like we have an expectation for a member to represent the guild and be somewhat active, there's an expectation for an officer to also represent, to have a higher standard, right? Like there's membership standard of representing the guild, and officers, like you're really expected to represent the guild well, be able to kind of be a figurehead of the guild, and then take an active role in not just being a participant, but leading event, like leading the community. So leading raids or organizing events, or like there's one of our officers is the guy who organizes the ship, for example. So there's that expectation that an officer is, you don't become, like you said, you don't become an officer and then start doing stuff. The officer status in our guild is an acknowledgement and a reflection that you are actively participating in a very high leadership kind of role. So there's a couple versions of how to do officers. And
I think the larger the guild you have, the harder it is to have my situation where everybody's an officer.
Right, exactly.
Because we maintain a fairly small to medium size, it works. The larger the guild is, the more you have problems with people like not, respecting, I guess, that kind of trust or that kind of equality amongst everybody. So that's part of it. It works. If you've gotten into the guild, you can be an officer pretty much because we don't put a lot of responsibility in someone necessarily being an officer. We just want everybody to have access to the hook points, and the actual managing and leadership, etc., is taken part. Everybody takes part, so that's part of why everybody is an officer.
I think if you're looking to lead, if you're new to leading a guild, you're looking to lead a guild, I think the best advice I can give you with officers is make sure everyone in the guild understands that officer status is not necessarily a reflection of your skill level or how much as a leader I like you. Right? Like that's not what officer means. Whether you're talking about like more like Bonnie's guild where everyone's an officer, or Voodoo in my current guild where there's kind of more of officer people who are kind of taking a higher ownership and leadership of the guild. That's not necessarily that's not a reflection on the people who aren't officers, that they're bad players or they're bad people or we don't care about them or they don't have a say in things and how the guilds run. It's just not everyone's an officer, and these are the people that have taken, what I like to say is they have an ownership of the vision of the guild, which is where I'm going to kind of push us to next, because we're kind of running along here and I want to get to the other ones. But for me, like, as a leader, you're responsible for casting the vision of the guild. What does your guild look like? What does everyone want the guild to look like? You're responsible for casting it and maintaining it and making sure that that is what your guild is. And I think as a leader, what you want to do, particularly with officers, is get those people to own that vision. And this is not, when we're talking about vision, I mean, this is not something that you have to come up with on your own. It can be very collaborative, and I think it works best when it is collaborative with the people in your guild, members and officers. But I think a member is someone who understands the vision and is on board with the vision, or the mission, if you prefer that language. As an officer is someone who takes ownership of it, which, what I mean by that is they're working to maintain it, to promote it, to make it happen. That's kind of how I personally view the difference between like a member, an officer, and a leader. Is leader casts the vision and maintains it. The officers are on board with it and are really actively trying to make that happen. And the members are, I like it, I'm into that, I'm with you. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think the only just the distinction, like that my guild is compared to maybe like the leader casting the vision, is because it's a smaller, tight-knit group. There are members who really kind of shape the guild because we're kind of equilateral in terms of who has officership, who is in charge, things like that. There are people who distinguish themselves by how they play the game and how they interact with other people. So they're members of the guild, like Steelrender, a former member of the guild, or who now no longer plays Lotusfly, or Ooze, or Gordy, or Moosey, who are regular players. They interact with everyone. They represent, what we're about, and they engage a lot with people outside of the guild at times, and they really kind of motivate the other members of the guild into doing things. And so not even by being the leader, by being an active participant in the guild, and by just generally being cool people, they lead us and they shape what our priorities are, what we get excited about, by getting excited, by being positive about different aspects of activities we can pursue in DDO, whether it's raiding or whether it's, right now doing a lot of Temple of Elemental Evil and that kind of thing. It's enthusiasm of your active players, of the people that are respected in the guild because of whether they're a long-term player or whether they're a really active player or whether they're a really generous player, shapes the overall vision and the missions of what a guild's about.
To spell a point out, like in High Lords, for example, the officers are expected to enforce the rules, and that doesn't mean they're being dogmatic or dictatorial. But if they see somebody breaking the rules or acting the fool, they're expected to say something. There's a lot of times that if somebody's breaking rules or acting the fool, you got people are sort of standing around like, is somebody going to say something? And this, I think it's natural for people to be like that in real life too, whether it's work situations or social situations. And the leaders are expected to intervene if there are problems or infractions that happen. And we talked about what makes an officer, and I want to use an example of the most recent officer that that we promoted, and is somebody who has been in the guild for a long time, who is well liked, who is a skillful player, who has a good demeanor, good people skills, which is another good qualification for being an officer, active member. But one of the things that just really made him just sort of really just shine was that he took it upon himself to learn the Titan raid, which is one of the most despised and intricate raids in the game.
It's my favorite raid.
He took it upon himself to learn it and then go out of his way to teach guildies, to make a concerted effort week after week after week to teach it to guildies. How awesome is that? I mean, that's really stepping up and taking that leadership role.
Absolutely.
Really, really cool.
So I want to end our discussion with dealing with conflict, because I think that's a really important thing. As a guild leader, you're going to have conflict. It's going to come up. We all hate it, but you kind of have to deal with it. So what are some tips that you guys have for handling conflict?
Well, there has to be that willingness, like Voodu was talking about, where when somebody is doing something that is not kosher, they have to be willing to step up and say something and use their voice. Now, depending on your guild, the tactfulness with which they express this displeasure or this concern may vary, but people need to be willing to, say when something isn't okay. But there's also this thing where we need to expect from guild members the ability to accept that when someone says, okay, that was not cool, we have concerns, they need to be receptive and be able to have that discussion. So that's very important. I think it's a two-way street handling conflict, because if an individual can't be receptive to authority when the circumstance happens that you actually need to use it, you just can't manage that kind of conflict.
I think the thing that the one piece of advice I think is really important is if there's two people that are kind of having an issue, if it's best if they can kind of resolve it themselves, but that doesn't always happen. I think that the best advice I can give is listen to both people. Now, it doesn't mean that one person's not going to be totally off the rails and totally in the wrong, but it's always best if you can have a chance, give both people a chance to talk with you about what's going on, so you can have a fuller picture and not just going off of one person's viewpoint of what's going on. And don't be afraid, too. One of my guild leaders oftentimes came to me or someone else to say, hey, here's what's going on. What do you think? So there's some value in having other leaders in the guild kind of help you figure out how to navigate it. But I would say don't broadcast it to the entire guild. Keep it close. If you, I mean, it might, the whole guild may be aware of it, but unless you don't necessarily want to take a conflict that's kind of between two people and broadcast it to everybody, because that's not necessarily respectful or helpful for everyone involved. Now, if it escalates to where you maybe are kicking someone out of the guild, then everyone's going to kind of need to be aware of that and what happened and why that's happening. But I think you kind of want to keep in mind, I kind of always like the idea that you start with the people involved. If you need another person, kind of bring them in to help mediate what's going on. But trying to keep the people actively involved in dealing with conflict smaller rather than getting everyone involved, I think is generally helpful for a lot of reasons.
I really prefer not having things behind a curtain approach. I like that openness about having everybody know what happened, why it happened, and what do we expect in the future so that it doesn't happen again, kind of thing. Because that's just really important for moving on. And I don't want people to have questions about why something happened the way that it did. Why were people upset? I want it to be very out in the open. So that's why I always encourage people to communicate and discuss whenever there's any kind of disagreement or conflict about an issue. I want both sides or all the people who are involved and affected to communicate. And in my guild, I think it's pretty much people talk, we communicate. I ask the people who are like the most active, who I really respect their opinions, about what they feel before I make a final decision, and I leave it open to have people change my mind. If they have a good argument.
Voodu, do you have any thoughts on conflict?
Earlier I talked about the process of getting into like a guild like High Lords, and that can be lengthy, and that we have strong front-end recruitment policy, and that's to make sure that we don't have to deal with as much drama once people get in. So it's not a perfect system, but because we have that strong recruiting policy, it's rare that conflict and drama arises. But it does happen sometimes, and we do have a council of officers, and that 3-officer votes rule is also critical in making decisions about conflict resolution. If something comes up and it is a bigger deal, we'll talk about it as among the officership. We have monthly scheduled meetings, but sometimes we have meetings in between, impromptu meetings if something serious arises. So we all discuss what the more serious issue is and come up with a resolution. But if it's a less serious situation, like I'll use an example. This was from some time ago, and I won't use names, but and this really speaks to our prime directive about being respectful to others. I had a guildie in a pug with some other guildies. It was like half guildies, half pugs, and the guildie was saying some pretty offensive stuff about women. Not okay. Totally not okay. Against our rules. I found out about it, and so in that situation, in that particular situation, I acted unilaterally in approaching the guildie because he broke the rules, period. I don't need to discuss with the other officers whether or not this person broke the rules. So make it clear to that person, this is not acceptable, it can't happen here. And the infraction was to such a degree that I actually found out who the offended party was, because this was a situation where this guildie was saying, like I said, offensive things about women, and there was a woman in the group that they didn't know about, because they're not on mic, I tracked that person down and apologized on behalf of the guild and let that person know that this is not acceptable, that's not who we are, and that hopefully, we can smooth this over.
That's some good advice about if the conflict was someone outside of your guild, and kind of reaching out and being involved with that person, and particularly in that situation, I think it's really good to do it. The last thing I want to talk about is, when do you give the boot? How do you go about kicking someone out of the guild? Because as a guild leader, you're probably going to have to. Hopefully it doesn't happen very often, but even in my guild leader in Fallen Heroes, bless her heart, was very, very reticent of kicking people out of the guild. And I can really, over the course of 3, 4, or 5 years, I can only really think of one person that she actually really just kicked out of the guild. But so what are kind of you guys' thoughts on actually removing someone from the guild? How does that work in your guild?
I've only removed accounts because of inactivity ever. There's been 2 instances that I can think of where we've had the discussion so far about whether or not an individual needs to continue in the guild, and it hasn't quite reached the point where we have asked them to leave or put them on some kind of double top secret probation status or something like that. Usually people who aren't working out, there have been, maybe I could count on one hand, people who have chosen to leave because it didn't work out for them for any particular reason, but they weren't asked to leave. So it's that recruitment process, I think. Most of the time, I think we get it right, and the issues that we have within the guild are not significant enough to an extent that we would give someone the boot. Or we've learned how to manage or have a policy or how we handle a certain situation that doesn't involve kicking someone out but maybe penalizing them in some way. So I think giving people the boot is a fairly, I mean, I think it's a significant thing, but I think it's a more significant thing the more effort you put into the recruitment process. That if you're a very open guild and you don't really filter who is allowed in the guild, that, you know, you may have just some unilateral rules about when people get booted. Like if they don't log on for 2 weeks, boot them, kind of thing, because you're only interested in active people. Or if someone has one strike with your policy or rules, you kick them, because it's just very straightforward. This is what we expect, and you didn't do it, so go. Because there's not as much of that personal, emotional involvement with who you recruited, and how much emotions and effort you put into getting to know them, and having them like kind of, I don't know, having them join the whole process, or the mindset or the camaraderie of your guild.
For us, it's 3 officer votes to boot again, and that's usually something that we're going to discuss. And before we ever get to that point, we try to, talk to the person. If it's rules infractions, if it's personality issues, whatever the case may be, talk to the person multiple times, potentially with multiple officers, then give that person, a second and a third chance, unless the infraction was so severe that it required being booting right away. I mean, it's really, really rare that we get to that point in High Lords, but it has happened a few times.
I think the bigger your guild, the more often it's going to happen.
And like I said, like I don't want to boot somebody. Like it has happened, and we've actually gotten, over the years, gotten to a point where, like, I had to tell people, like, if this comes up again, you're gone, kind of thing. And in both of those situations, we didn't end up booting them, but it got to that point, like we were right there. But it emphasizes, like, I don't want to boot these people. Like, I want them to be happy here. We have an awesome guild, and I want them to appreciate that. But we have to get along, and we have to check the drama at the door, because nobody wants to deal with that.
Yeah, it's a really unfortunate situation when you even have to have that discussion or consider it. Because I think, like, with my guild, when people are in the guild, it's because we like them. It's because we want to be friends with them. And we certainly don't want there to be any kind of parting on a bad note. We want everybody, even if someone leaves the guild, we want to remain in touch with them and have them group with us, and have it be this, keep that kind of team spirit going. So it's a really sad and stressful thing to even have to consider, putting your foot down and saying that this particular situation was not acceptable to a degree that we're going to have to ask you to leave for at least a period of time. And so it's always good to never, I love that we rarely ever had to have that conversation, because I think that's the way it should be.
I think my advice on it is be clear about what the issue is. If hopefully it's something that you can, it's not necessarily going to be a one-off, they're gone kind of thing, but if somebody say, hey, we're not okay with this as a guild, that's not who we are, have a conversation about it, and hopefully that they'll be in agreement. I would say when you do boot someone, I think there's a lot of value in, depending on the person, generally there's a lot of value in saying, we're removing you from the guild, this is why. So that it's really clear, they can't come back later and say it's because of this reason. Well, no, it wasn't that. You did something stupid and we weren't okay with it and we booted you for that, or you just weren't on. Hopefully, if there's a time an active thing, then that's hopefully up front. Tell it. But I think you guys are saying the recruiting process is a big part of this, right? And for Voodu, I'm sure one of your rules kind of outlines how you would get removed from the guild and get in the guild, and it's something you probably go over. Like, this is what we expect from you, and this is how we deal with that if we have to. So that it's up front. As much as you can do up front is helpful, because then it's at least not a surprise.
I'm thinking of one situation where, it, like I said, we'll talk to the person multiple times, and sometimes it's going to be, I'm not going to have that talk with that person saying, here's why you're being removed, because we've already talked to them multiple times, and they didn't get it. And
Well, I
me
would say that
saying,
you've
here's
already
why.
talked to them at that point.
Right.
So.
Here's you know, having that final talk, like if they didn't get it at that point, they're not going to get it now. But like I said, we already talked to them up to that point multiple times.
If they just don't get it, you know, we only have that conversation when we feel like someone's just not getting it, and there's kind of like this sense of that trust of the friendship has been tarnished a little, and everybody's not necessarily comfortable with holding them like super close to them as a friend, but it's never to just completely burn the bridge. I mean, we always talk about it in terms of, okay, we want you to step away from the guild for now, but like, you know, let's have this rebuilding time, you know, to kind of make sure that everybody's really on the same page, and you know, that we trust your judgment again, and that kind of thing. It's like that rebuilding period, and we've always looked at it from that sense, not this we're kicking you off the island, you know, go away, you no longer exist, you know. I just think because there's been so much thought and effort put into meeting people and making friends with people that you want to guild with and want to group with.
Excellent. Well, I think that was an overly long and excellent discussion. We're going to cruise through the news and a little bit of post really fast. Update 25 Patch 2 was released. Just a couple of highlights. The number of mysterious remnants that appear when killing a champion has been doubled on all difficulties, both for mini-boss chests and non-chest drops, and there was much rejoicing.
I still get odd numbers, though. I don't know how that works.
They doubled the dice.
The die roll, yeah.
Okay.
So instead of it being like 1d10, it's 2d10. So you can still have an odd number. It's not like they're
odd
taking
number.
a number
So they don't double
doubling
the
it.
number of fragments. It's the incidence of them appearing.
Right. There was some confusion about that on the forum.
Hey, wait, for the mathematicians listening, 2d10 is not going to produce an odd number.
Okay, sure.
Sure.
Well, it could. If you roll a 1 and a 2, you get an odd number.
Oh, I was thinking like 2 times a d10 roll, but yeah,
No,
you're right.
2d10 roll.
That is why math is hard.
Yeah.
Order of operations.
Sneak attack now scales with 150% melee or range power. There are a whole bunch of changes to the rogues that we talked about. There were some fixes to some enhancements as well. Hirelings standing the ground will no longer leave their assigned area to aid players. Something they've been talking about for a while. They fixed an issue with +7 tomes. Let's see. And a bunch of stuff got correctly added to the monster manual, so things will now count. Particularly lions and orcs, apparently, were a problem. And the chest after defeating Zuggtmoy should no longer be locked. There's a new item, the Elemental of Victory, which I think you have to kill or beat all the 4 of the nodes, and you get an absorption item.
It's lovely.
For those that don't know, when you glamour that, it looks different than when you first wear it. When you first wear it, it's 4 like sort of haphazardly placed ion stones spinning around your head. If you glamour it, it's 4 evenly spaced gems that are spinning around your head. So it looks significantly different. It's kind of cool. Both of them look pretty cool.
It's interesting. I hadn't heard that.
The best part of that item is how it looks.
Yes.
There's also a waypoint at the entrance to the quest now, so you can get out through the front door.
That's helpful.
Yeah. So there was some notes on Temple of Elemental Evil, particularly with the loot, on where to find stuff. There's a lot of different loot that drops in a lot of different places, and the distribution is a bit different than a lot of other dungeons. For the upgradable elemental weapons, those are found in each dungeon's end chest, random encounter chest, and the Arc Reward. If you've been playing that, you've probably seen a lot of them. The drop rate for each kind of weapon is roughly equal. If you're looking for one of a particular element, you may want to search the random encounters in the particular node for that element. For the upgradable elemental armors, you'll want to search the random encounters in the nodes in Part 2. The mythic named weapons can be found in random encounters within the temple, but not inside the nodes, the dev thinks, as well as
we have gotten
chests.
them out of the temple chest and like the first one you encounter with the orange names. Not in the nodes themselves, but...
Right. It's so not they weren't sure. I don't remember who posted. I think it was Vergil. but I might be wrong on that. Maybe still start. But if you're looking for the named items, probably don't look in the nodes, but look for other chests. The odds are you can find them in the end chest. However, your odds are much higher on the random encounter chest than the end chest for those weapons. The mushroom cap is the only item unique to the end chest of Part 2. And additionally, plus 6 to 7 upgrade tomes can only be found in the end chest for either 1 or 2. I think you have to be an Epic Elite for that as well. There was some talk about Temple of Elemental Evil, and Severlin kind of threw in some quick comments. There was a question about bumping the XP for Slayers. She said yes. He also said for bumping the XP for completion, which will also result in a bump of optional XP. They also bumped the chance for random encounters in the first temple quest to appear. There was kind of a question about not enough things to click on. The reason there aren't more clickies is that the resulting materials are campaign specific. They agree that dungeons like this need more to click on and a few more static traps or encounters, and will be carrying that forward for the next exploratory dungeon that they do. Some news on Update 26 and beyond. They're currently targeting June for Update 26 and 27 in the fallish. 26 will continue the epic battle you experience after you travel to Amrath and will feature new quests, both her heroic and epic versions. They're hoping to have Warlock out for Update 26 as well. They should have more to say on that soon. Things could change, but they're looking at the low double digits, low teens for the heroic versions. It's possible it may take a few leaps of lore logic to make that happen, but I think we'll get over it. I'm just going to say, probably most players are more concerned about having fun and playing the quest than their specific lore. Lore is kind of frou-frou-y on the top. That's my opinion. I don't know if you guys would say anything different.
I agree.
I like everything.
Lore is fun. I'm not saying lore like completely ignore lore, but if the quest is awesome, I'm gonna be much more forgiving about the lore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as long as the logic is cool in one or the other. I don't care about the other, So as long as it fits for epic or the story fits for heroic, I'm cool.
They came back and said heroic versions base level 13-ish.
Yay!
Epic level 30. Some bugs. In general, a handful of named items have specific functions, benefits, or effects can interfere with glamored weapon auras. They've been working to correct those individually when they come across them. There was also, with the patch, they had to come up with a hotfix because ladders and buildings and bases in Von 6 all went poof. It disappeared.
We were so thankful we'd run Von 5-6 the night before.
Yeah, there's some surprised people that zoned into Von 6 only to find that the base they were supposed to stand on wasn't there. And made some challenges. Galanda's also still been having some problems. Hopefully they fixed that.
Poor Galanda.
Yeah, Galanda is on some rough times.
Oh my god, I feel so
hard
bad
out
for
there on
those
the
guys.
streets of Galanda.
Yeah, if you're on Galanda, our heart goes out to you. Hang in there. I know they're working on it. I know they want to get it right.
The struggle is real.
Bonus days, Water Week is here. You get +2 loot, plus 50% challenge rewards. If you've been waiting for a challenge, now's the time. And double daily dice XP through May 7th. Woohoo. Sales, 25% off of character slots, questing tools, healing items, SP potions, and you can get a 25 stack of plus 25% crafting success boosters with the code CRFT25 once per account.
Oh, wow. I need to make a note of that.
140th Chronicle, BonnieBew and Moosey Pants have a new Twitch show, which was debuted last night.
It was a long show. We had fun, though.
Fun is good. Makar DDO has a 10-week challenge. The first week ends tonight, so it's not too late if you want to participate in that. I need to do that because I was going to go give it a whirl more for fun's sake. But the second week is also up as well, so it's basically complete quests as low as level as possible. The first one is Cobalt Assault, the second one is Small Problem. So it looks like a lot of fun. The Heroes of Hinfolk had their trivia event yesterday. Synergia on Arganesson will be hosting regular Epic Elite raid trains, so you can find out about that. High Lords, of course, are still doing teaching raids. How'd Master Artificer and Lord of Blades go?
Awesome. We had 8 people that were new or newer to those raids. In fact, all 8 of them were brand new to Lord of Blades. It was such a good time. The video of Master Artificer is already up on my YouTube channel, and the Lord of Blades video will be coming in a couple of days.
Lord of Lies is a really fun raid.
I like them both. My only complaint with Master Artificer was that the room that you're in is a little lacking visually, but it's fun.
Like a box.
Yeah, it's a little boring artistically, but it's a really good mechanic raid. Arcane Alliance is an Orion-based guild recruiting all players. It's a level 63 guild, so you can find out about them. The comment for the week is, what is your favorite creature on the periodic table of elements? Which is kind of a weird. I'm not really sure what that means. So for a change and for time, I'm going to skip it.
The periodic table of elementals.
Yeah, elementals. I don't. That's weird.
You're just asking you to make.
Wait, there's only 4. There's not like 100 plus elementals, I don't think.
So which is your favorite element?
Yeah, really. Yeah. Fire elemental, air elemental.
I find
like
fire to be the least painful. Actually, water's the least painful, I guess. But
that used to be.
it's true.
I would want to be an air elemental more than anything, though, if I had a choice.
Yeah, that's fair. Fansite news. DDO Gamers looking for writers, so you can check that out. We had a shout out for our last debate show. DDO Players News had a show. Artists of Eclectica was looking at making an untouchable archer. Axel's DDO YouTube channel looked at Human and Purple Dragon Knight. Enrique got a nice end reward from the Catacombs. Let's see. There was a post about account support FAQ, so you can check that out. I don't see anything else in here. The last Spring Fling was this week. Sad to see that go.
Yeah.
There was a community
It was a fun ride.
There was a community update video. The big thing that was out of there that wasn't anything else was Jerry is starting a new Twitch on Friday, and he mentioned BonnieBew and Music Pants, and there's another one that was new as well.
CSI Stormreach and Shindoku from Orion. We're also show Friday nights around 8 p.m. I think Eastern.
There was a third episode of Dirty Kobold, another podcast as well. Just a quick note on some general gaming news. The 3.5 Player's Handbook is now available in PDF.
Woohoo!
Isn't that like 15 years after it came out? So, kind of like that. Lightning Post. Samus Garobo wrote in on Twitter. His guest DM list starts with @HellCowKeith and then hits people like James Wyatt, Bill Slavicek, and Monte Cook. We were talking about stealth and a lot about Temple of Elemental Evil last week. Taciturn Badger 2 said that he completed Temple of Elemental Evil with only 18 kills, which is really impressive.
Nice.
How you do that?
Good job.
We love invisibility.
That's really impressive. Goodwill Hunting says that everyone knows that casters are ultimate builds for Epic Elite, and he doesn't see that changing or anything changing in that regard. I would say that that's not necessarily true anymore, but they are certainly one of the more powerful.
Now take a look at Cetus's build. I mean, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a caster or something else?
No, he's a barbarian.
It's
I think
something
right
else.
now, dual wielding.
Cetus.
I think dual wielding warhammers right now. He evolves his build, but he does some really impressive things with the melee.
Yeah, I think right now there's a lot of choices. If you like a particular flavor of character, you have an option that's going to be functional in Epic Elite. So it's a fun time to play DDO.
Indeed. I'm going to skip the survey question of the week. Save it for another time. So with that, Bonnie, why don't you plug what you got going on?
I have a lot of stuff going on. Let's see, quick. Moosey Pants and I are going to be guests on the DDO Players podcast tomorrow night, Monday, May 4th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. And then our show is on Saturday nights on the DDO Stream Twitch channel at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
And Voodu.
I run Ginger Spice's DDO YouTube channel. The name is Voodu Spice on YouTube. It's an official fan site, so you can find it on DDO.com under fan sites. Over 150 videos, quest tutorials, raid guides, crafting tutorials too. I have a beginner's guide to Caneth crafting for people who know nothing about Caneth crafting. So now that you got your your free store crafting XP pots, you can check out my Beginner's Guide to Caneth Crafting on my YouTube channel and learn all about it.
So thanks, guys, for being on the show, and thanks to all the other contributors for DDOcast, and thanks for listening to the show. Go ahead and leave us your comments. If you have tips on leading a guild, feel free to leave those as well. Thanks to Turbine and Wizards and to Cyberbears for hosting the podcast. You can hit us up at DDOcast.com for show notes, our calendar, previous shows, swag, and other fun stuff. If you'd like to be part of the show or you'd like to just say hi, you can email us at DDOcast@gmail.com. If you have a topic you'd like us to discuss, questions you'd like to ask us, send us an email or leave a comment. Our closing tip from the week comes from Xerxion on Kyber. DDO is best with friends, so bring some or make some. I'm a fan of both. So until next time, may all your attack rolls be crits, all your chests level appropriate, have fun, and don't forget to give your guild leader a hug.